Agatha Mary Clarissa Miller was born in 1890 in late Victorian England, at a time when rules and expectations shaped nearly every corner of family life. She grew up in Torquay, on the Devon coast, in a home that kept her close and carefully protected. It was a sheltered start, but not an empty one. She was surrounded by books early, and those pages offered her something the outside world did not: freedom to choose where the mind went. With so much of childhood spent indoors and under watchful care, her attention turned inward. Reading did not just entertain her, it trained her. She absorbed stories, patterns, and the way a sentence could steer a reader toward one idea while hiding another. In a quiet life, small details mattered, and she noticed them. When days looked similar from the outside, she learned to make them different in her head. That private habit became a kind of practice. The result was a young girl who relied on imagination the way others relied on travel or conversation. She learned to build whole worlds without needing permission, and to sit with her own thoughts until they sharpened. It was not dramatic, and it did not look like preparation for anything, but it laid a foundation. Years later, when she needed to invent suspects, motives, and perfectly timed turns, she already had the skill that mattered most. She had learned to live inside a story. When the First World War arrived, it did not only pull men into uniforms, it pulled ordinary lives into new kinds of work. She trained as a nurse and entered the hospital system, where everything depended on speed, accuracy, and calm under pressure. Patients came in with infections, shock, and terrible injuries. She learned routines that left no room for guessing. Mistakes did not stay theoretical. As the war continued, she shifted into dispensary work, and the lessons became even more exact. Here, she handled drugs by name and by dose, preparing medicines that could heal or harm depending on a single measure. She saw how doctors relied on compounds that sounded harmless, yet acted fast inside the body. She learned which symptoms belonged to illness and which belonged to poisoning. This was not the world of stories anymore. It was a daily training ground in consequences. She watched how substances behaved, how quickly they worked, and how easily evidence could be misunderstood. She absorbed the language of prescriptions and the logic of controlled access, who could touch what and when. Later, when she wrote murders that felt frighteningly possible, this war work provided the practical foundation. After the war ended, she moved into a new life at speed. She married Agatha Christie, a young Royal Air Force officer, and the daily focus shifted to building a home and soon raising a child. It sounded like the moment when ambition might have been put away. But it did not disappear. It turned practical. She wrote in the gaps, treated writing like work, and aimed for something specific. A detective story that could compete on shelves. She had not written for the page like this before, so she learned by doing, drafting and redrafting until the puzzle held together. She chose a form readers already loved, a crime, a trail of clues, and a final explanation that proved the author had played fair. The first attempt did not slide easily into print. Publishers hesitated. Rejections arrived. Each one forced a decision. She kept going, and she kept tightening the mechanics of the mystery. The breakthrough came with a new kind of investigator, one who solved problems through method and observation rather than force or privilege. She built the book around that mind at work, and it gave the story its shape and its pace. When it was finally published, it marked a shift from private writing to public career. She was no longer only a wife and mother who wrote on the side. She became a published mystery novelist with a detective readers wanted back. In the 1920s, her books stopped being a personal project and started becoming a public force. Each new mystery found more readers, and her name began to travel ahead of her. Reviews noticed her control of clues. Publishers wanted the next title quickly. The work turned regular, even demanding, because the audience now expected to be surprised on schedule. She did not just write crime stories. She became a recognizable crime writer. With that recognition came pressure, and her private life did not stay separate for long. A personal crisis hit hard, and it did not stay behind closed doors. The strain affected her home, her routines, and her sense of safety. Then, in a sudden break that no one expected, she disappeared. She was not reachable. She was not accounted for. In a country that had learned her name from book covers, the missing author became front-page news. The search became a national spectacle, driven by uncertainty and fueled by constant reporting. Strangers formed opinions, newspapers filled gaps with guesses, and her life became a public puzzle in the same way her novels were. Every hour without an answer raised the temperature. Her success, which had built through steady publication, now worked against her because fame created stakes for everyone watching. The disappearance changed what her name meant overnight. After her first marriage collapsed, she faced a hard reset. The private hurt stayed, but the public attention had already taught her a lesson. Her life could not be left to chance. She focused on what she could control. Writing became work again, not refuge. She kept deadlines, accepted commissions, and treated her name as a profession. It did not erase the loss. It gave her structure. She leaned into craft with a new seriousness. Each book had to earn its place, not only in reviews, but in the bank. Success no longer felt like a pleasant surprise. It felt like responsibility. She maintained her output, listened to editors, and protected her time. That discipline changed her. She stopped waiting for stability to arrive and started building it page by page, contract by contract. Gradually, the crisis years stopped defining her. The work restored confidence, and confidence restored calm. She arranged her days around writing and her child's needs, and she learned what independence actually required. The result was simple but decisive. She moved forward without needing to explain herself. Out of that steadier life, a new creative phase became possible, one shaped less by turmoil and more by control. After the collapse of her first marriage, Agatha Christie moved forward, not by retreating, but by changing direction. She met Max Mallowan, a young archaeologist whose work pulled him far from England. Their marriage did not just offer companionship, it offered a new map for her life. Instead of staying close to familiar places, she followed his work, and that decision quietly reshaped what her writing could contain. Mallowan's job took them into the Middle East again and again, to digs where archaeology was becoming a modern, organized science. Christie watched how a site was measured, recorded, and slowly uncovered layer by layer. She learned the rhythm of expeditions, the long travel, the small communities that formed around the work. For a crime writer, that world carried a built-in tension. People arrived, people left, and everyone noticed everything. The journeys changed her fiction in a direct way. Foreign trains, hotels, and remote settlements stopped being vague backdrops and became central textures that shaped motives and opportunities. Archaeology brought its own logic too, the past hidden under the present, the careful search for a truth that could not be guessed. Christie did not abandon the puzzle. She expanded its territory. Her cases now had a wider horizon, and her readers travelled with her. In the 1930s, her writing entered a different gear. Book after book arrived, not as experiments, but as confident constructions that readers could trust. She expanded her range without losing control. The cases became tighter, the clues cleaner, and the solutions harder to guess but easier to accept once revealed. This decade did not simply add titles to her name, it raised the standard. A crucial step came with a new detective, Miss Marple. She did not rely on authority, force, or status. She relied on observation, memory, and a sharp understanding of human behavior. That change mattered. It let Christie build mysteries from ordinary habits and small social details, then turn them into proof. Miss Marple widened the kind of reader who felt invited into the puzzle, and the audience kept growing. At the same time, Christie perfected the closed circle puzzle. She placed a crime inside a sealed group where everyone belonged and no one escaped suspicion. The setting could vary, but the logic stayed strict. The answer had to come from within. That structure increased tension and fairness at once. It showcased her control of timing and misdirection. By the end of the decade, she held worldwide readers through pure craft. World War II changed the conditions of her work overnight. Normal routines collapsed, travel became harder, and every day carried a new uncertainty. Yet publishers and readers still expected the next book, and she kept delivering. She wrote with deadlines pressing and with the war sitting behind every practical decision. The pressure did not slow her down, it sharpened her focus, and it pushed her towards some of her most decisive choices as a writer. During these years, she also planned for an ending, even while the world fought to survive. She wrote what she privately treated as her last cases, stories held back for the future, as if she needed to secure a final word for her famous detectives. It was a strange kind of insurance. If anything happened, the work already existed. Those manuscripts carried a different weight. They were not just the next puzzle. They were a decision about legacy. At the same time, one story stepped away from the page and began a new life on stage. The Mousetrap started its performance career, and the change mattered. A book could be put down, but a play returned night after night, repeated with the same turns and the same shocks. Her plots gained a new permanence through performance, reaching audiences who never followed publishing news. In wartime, that steady return of her stories became its own kind of proof. After the war, her work stopped feeling like the output of one writer and started functioning like a public utility. Publishers kept the novels in print and kept adding more formats, so new readers found her without hunting for her. The stories moved across borders with ease. One country's bestseller became another's. Sales climbed, then stayed high. Her name no longer followed the books, it led them. Film and television adapted the mysteries in steady waves, turning familiar plots into mass entertainment. Each adaptation created a loop. Viewers bought the books, and readers looked for the screen versions. The characters became widely recognizable, even to people who had never opened a novel. Producers and broadcasters treated her stories as reliable material, clear premises, strong twists, clean endings. In a crowded market, that dependability became its own kind of power. Major honors followed, the kind given to cultural figures who seemed to represent more than themselves. Public appearances and official recognition confirmed what audiences already acted on. Her work belonged to everyone now. The scale changed the meaning of success. She did not simply have popular titles. She had an entire system of reprints, performances, and adaptations that kept renewing her audience. By then, fame arrived automatically, long before the next page turned. Long after her lifetime, her work kept moving. Her novels stayed in print, not as collectibles, but as everyday paperbacks, e-books, and audiobooks that reached new readers without pause. Publishers refreshed covers, updated editions, and pushed translations into more languages. Each new generation found the same promise, a clear question, a fair set of clues, and an ending that clicked into place. The market never treated her as finished history. Adaptations also kept arriving because her stories already carried built-in momentum. Film and television producers returned again and again to the same titles, then searched deeper for lesser-known plots, turning them into new series, specials, and modern retellings. The detective stayed at the centre of it, the brilliant outsider with the sharp mind, and the unassuming village observer who saw through people, still set the standard for what a mystery lead looked like. That influence reached beyond her own pages. Writers borrowed her structures, audiences measured new puzzles against her methods, and the idea of the solvable crime stayed tied to her name. Her work circulated in classrooms, bookstores, streaming platforms, and long-running stage traditions, all at once. The contrast landed hard. The quiet child who once disappeared into books in Torquay ended up as a global brand read and watched everywhere year after year.